All right, we'll get started this morning. Nobody offered to do the testimonial today, so did anybody have one prepared? Brother Kyle Smiley, he's got one prepared for us. And we talked last week. Somebody remind me what we talked about last week. Brother Jarvis?
Royal law.
The royal law, that's absolutely right. Book of James, and we talked about if you fulfill the royal law, you do well. What is the royal law?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Perfect. So what we're going to do today, in continuing that thought, is we're going to look at both the method for us, how do we fulfill the royal law, what's the method of that for us, and the objective, what's the outcome that we're looking for as we fulfill the royal law, loving your neighbor as yourself. So those are the two things we'll be looking at today, pretty much summarized in one particular verse. All right, so we'll start it out with some thoughts on that. How do we love our neighbor as ourselves? How are we able? Let me rearrange the question. How is it that you and I are able to love our neighbor as we're supposed to, as we love ourselves? Brother Ryan, what you think there?
I think there's two sides to it. A lot of people in the world today think it's just loving on people. You absolutely have to help people if they can't do it or don't have the ability or whatever. But I think loving somebody is also telling them when they're wrong and trying to correct them if they do something opposite of God's word. Because if you don't, they're going to continue to go down a bad path. So I think that's true love. Both sides of it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think those two sides of the same coin. Loving your neighbor is loving on them when there's a need or some kind of expression that you need to do there with them. But also the other side is whenever you're correcting someone from the error of their way. What else would you add to that, Brother Ham?
I can't think of anything to add to it.
Okay. How is it that we're able to love our neighbor? That's part of my question there. God first loved us is absolutely right. Go to Matthew chapter 4. It'll be our beginning verse. Here in Matthew, this is where we see, we're looking at the method, so to speak. When I say method, I mean, what do we need? What do we need to be doing? How do we execute that royal law, the command to love your neighbor as yourself? I think there's a fundamental piece that we have to look at first so that we can then love our neighbor as ourselves. And we're going to use two words that we find here in this passage of Scripture. So Brother Lee, if you'll read for us verse 19, Matthew chapter 4 and verse 19.
And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.
This is the passage of Scripture where Jesus is talking to Peter, Simon Peter, and Andrew. And what Jesus says to them is, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. So that's what I want us to talk about today, is that's two words there, follow me. What is Jesus telling Peter and Andrew to do when he says, follow me? Don't overthink it. Just give me the gist of that. Follow the ways that Jesus is going to give them. Follow his ways, absolutely. What else? How else do we follow Jesus? What is Jesus saying of them?
Leave.
Say again?
We want them to give up what they're doing.
Okay.
Go with him.
That's right. That's definitely part of it. Give up what they're doing. What they're doing is fishing. That's their career path. Give that up so that they can follow him. What are you going to say, Brother Jeff?
That's what I was going to say, just leave where they're at.
Yeah, leave where they're at. You cannot fulfill the royal law if your starting position is not in following Jesus. That's the starting point of any walk of a Christian. Because by definition, the idea of a Christian is a follower of Jesus Christ. And so Jesus starts with his disciples with those two words, follow me. And he says with Andrew and Simon Peter, and I will make you fishers of men. But we cannot start our walk with God in any other way than following Jesus Christ. So I want to look at a few verses there, what we're supposed, when we say we're following him, what that means. Number one, we follow him and his invitation there, his direction that he gives. He tells Andrew and Simon Peter, follow me. And they leave behind their fishing nets, their following His ways and His example. They're doing what He's called them to do at this point. That's where it starts. What do you think the wrestle was? What's the wrestling in the flesh that possibly Simon and Andrew had to do, Peter and Andrew had to do, that would be like what we have to do if we're going to follow Jesus?
That's their livelihood.
Okay, that's their livelihood.
They probably feel like that's something they need to do to provide, which they didn't have families at the time. Leaving the job's kind of hard to follow. I feel like that's your duty to provide. Well, right now, father, husband. There are sometimes you do need to leave. That right there, that's their God, is that fishing. And they need to leave that.
Okay. I agree. There's a wrestle with that. If you're a guy, you feel that responsibility to provide for your family. Peter had a wife, so he did have a responsibility to provide for his family. And if he throws down that fishing net and follows Jesus, we have to wrestle in faith. Is there going to be provision? Is there something else that I need to be doing there? Can I really follow Jesus and meet my responsibilities at the same time? What's the other wrestling that we do in the flesh with that directive of Jesus to follow me? Some other examples. How about you, Jessica? You talk sometimes, so feel free to come to talk all of you. What are some of the things we wrestle with in the flesh when we're facing that direction of Jesus to follow Him?
I think fear of what other people are going to think, or,
Okay.
Is this the popular thing to do? How's it going to make me look?
Right. Yeah, that goes back to kind of what Brother Lee was saying. We follow His ways. We follow the ways of Jesus. They are starkly different than the rest of the world. And so we do wrestle with that in the flesh. Well, what's my family going to think? What is my friends going to think? What's others going to think? And so we wrestle with that in the flesh. If we're honest with ourselves, we all wrestle with that to some degree. How about you, Leslie? What do you wrestle with in the flesh with that command to follow Jesus?
Sacrifice myself.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to sacrifice myself. I like my routines and my ways and my daily, what all I've got lined up. And so, and I like my own creature comforts and all these things. And so sacrificing myself in that process is a hard thing that we wrestle with sometimes. The starting point of fulfilling the royal law has to be with a surrender of self and a submission to Christ when He says, follow me. If you're not following Christ, you are not going to fulfill the royal law, because you're going to be loving them in a way that you think is loving them. But if you're following Jesus, He's going to guide you in how to love other people. He's going to give you His Word to give direction on how to do that. And so we have to wrestle with the flesh. I'm sure Simon, Peter, and Andrew here, before they threw those nets down, there was a second thought there. If you follow Him, or what's my daddy about to think if I do this? Because they're working with his dad and those kind of things. And so what do they do, though? What does Simon, Peter, and Andrew do? Say again? Yeah, they left their nets, and then my secondary question to that is, when did they leave their nets? Brother Kyle, you just said it. What does that mean? Straight away. Immediately. That's right, immediately. So when do we need to follow Jesus? Yeah. Today. Immediately, when we feel that prompting of something, all throughout the course of the day, that following Jesus becomes also an abiding in Christ. Because we can't just follow Him when I first wake up in the morning. That's the easiest time of my day to follow Jesus. I get up, I've got my favorite chair, I sit in my chair with my cup of coffee and my creamer, and I've got my Bible, and I read in my Bible, and I pray, and I like to pull up some of my worship songs that I like to listen to on my YouTube. It's the easiest part of the day to follow Jesus. And then when I get up from that and I get busy in the day and I immediately get started, should I make up the bed or not? Nope. I just get right back in it at night. From that point forward to everything else, am I following Jesus? I need to be in a position of immediacy and abiding in Him to be able to follow Him. Because if I'm not abiding in Him, when He moves me at lunchtime to reach out and call someone to encourage them, if I don't even hear Him because I'm not abiding, I'm not going to be able to follow. So the place for us to start from as believers when it comes to fulfilling the royal law is from a place of commitment to follow Jesus Christ. And we wrestle with that. What does that look like? Let's go over to John chapter 12. Jesus says, follow me. In John chapter 12, our Brother Walker, read verse 26 for me.
If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor.
So I go to this verse, if any man will serve me. Tell me what you hear that saying, Brother Walker. Put that in your own words for me, verse 26. Sort of the phrasing of that verse. Excuse me. If any man serve me, let him follow me. So the phrasing of that verse is, in order to serve Jesus in some kind of way, we have to be following him. That's how that begins there in that passage of Scripture. So we may think or have this idea that we're serving Jesus. And so what we need to do is back up and make sure, am I following what Jesus has told me to do? Or am I following what in my flesh that I want to do? Because in my flesh, some of the things that I want to do are good things. We can look very religious in the things that we do. We can keep all kinds of traditions that are religious in nature. But yet if we're just walking in a religion, if we're just walking in traditions, and we've not considered, am I following Jesus Christ, then we're not serving him. That's the order of that phrasing there. If any man serve me. So if you're going to serve Jesus Christ, what's the next thing he says to do? Let him follow me. So we have to be diligent in examining, am I following Jesus Christ? Now, why did you come to church this morning? Ask that question. Is it because it's the right thing to do? It's Sunday, and by our religion we gather together at 9 or 10 o'clock for a Bible study and 11 o'clock for a worship service? Is that why you're here? Or is there a different reason that you're here? What do you think of that, Brother Michael? What your thoughts are on that?
Well, we can just do it because it's a habit or just because it's something that our parents raised us up doing, but we have the intention of following Jesus, we'll do it and serve him.
Yeah, I do think one of the dangers for us as Christians is that we've been raised in church and it becomes habitual and it feels good because we enjoy the people and it gives us a moment of reprieve from the week and all that kind of stuff. But why are you doing it? Why did you come this morning, Brother Michael?
Well, because to follow him, you have to, that's the fourth commandment, so remember the seventh day. Do what you want to do on it, but come serve him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How about you, Brother Lee? Why did you come to church this morning?
Probably a little bit of the, that's the right thing to do, but I do think it's, it's, you do want to follow God's way, you do want to serve, so this is a way the day you can lay down your will, and it's a day you can show the Lord you do for that.
Try.
But we do get caught up in the traditional,
It's easy to just step into the habit, the tradition, and the routine of things. I do challenge you to think about that. Each time that you come to church, just using that as an example, I'm there to follow Jesus. Jesus is going to be at church this morning. Right? That's our anticipation. It's our expectation is to experience Jesus in the Bible study hour, experience him in the worship time, experience him in the preaching. And so I want to follow Jesus. So I want to be where Jesus is at if I'm following him. And I want to hear what he has to say this week. And so I want to be able to hear that so that I can follow that instruction. And so our desire is to lay other things aside, like Simon Peter and Andrew did, and follow Jesus Christ. And I use church as an example because it's an easy one to use, but when we take that throughout the course of the week, why do you put in the extra time at work to do something well instead of just halfway do something? Or why do you work extra hard to not say something that you really want to say in the flesh? Why do you, if it's just because of anything else, as a Christian, I want to challenge you you're not loving that individual unless in what you're doing is following Jesus Christ. It's following the example that He gives, and that you're asking Him what to do in those moments, and that you follow the direction that He gives to you, even in those very moments. So that's why He says it there that way, if any man serve me, we're going to serve Jesus Christ. What's the number one way we can serve Jesus? It's a quiz. Put a hand, what you think. What's the number one way we can serve Jesus?
Follow Him.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's the starting point of it. Could say the royal law. Let's love other people as we love ourselves. That's the way to serve Jesus Christ. All right, go back to Matthew chapter 8. She's going to say it a little bit differently right here. Let's read verse 21 and 22 together. I apologize. I started too late. Back up to verse 18 and read on down through verse 22.
Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. And a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. And Jesus said unto him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head.
Let's pause right there. Let's just consider that for a second. That's an odd response that Jesus gives. The scribe is saying, Master, I will follow you wherever you go. Why does Jesus give that response, you believe?
It's not going to be comfortable. We're not going to my house to relax.
That's right. We're not just going to the house to relax and prop up our feet and drink our coffee and creamer. There's other things that's going to be happening here. You know, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Are we willing to follow Jesus in those kind of conditions? Now keep reading verse 21 and 22.
And another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said unto him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their dead.
That's a reasonable response to that other disciple, right? First, let me go and bury my father. That's a big deal. What's he saying? When his father has died, there's going to be a funeral. Let me go ahead and bury him. He's in his deathbed, so we're going to have to be there and serve him. And then Jesus' response to that is, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. Why does Jesus say that? It's a different kind of response as well. But Chris, what do you think on that one?
Well, I think it might refer more to let the dead in spirit take care of the dead. Follow me now, live with me in the spirit. Leave them, they can take care of that. And I think it just speaks more to, that life with Jesus, that connection.
Yeah, did Jesus ever attend a funeral? He did. So it's not the funeral itself that's the issue. It's not the burying of the dead. That's the issue. There's a spiritual element, just like Brother Chris just said in that. And so in our natural mind, one thing might make sense. But when we follow Jesus, and we have faith and we walk in that, and Christ makes it all okay. So he's gonna be at the funeral with us, but we have to commit to following him first. And I believe part of what he's saying there as well is we can't let anything, the death of a father, that's a big deal. We can't even let that come in between us and that command of Jesus Christ to follow Jesus. That command of God to follow Jesus Christ. That's first above anything else. We will never fulfill the royal law. We'll never do it unless you're following Jesus Christ. I'll move on to my next point in just a second. What kind of thoughts do you have right now as you think about that? Let me go into this one. Follow me, where Jesus followed me. Any thoughts, Doris? What's your thoughts on that?
So I was thinking of that verse about not looking back.
It says his hand is a plow,
Yeah.
and looking back is not fit for the kingdom of heaven.
There's maybe a lot of things in our past that hold us back from serving God.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true for every one of us in this room. There's things of the past, and Satan will remind you of those things. it'll make you think, well, you're not fit to follow Jesus Christ. But if you set your hand to the plow, which means you're going to labor to follow Jesus Christ, you can't look back on those things and let it hold you back from following Him. So what will it cost us? That's my next question and point that I want us to look at. When we make up our mind, we are committed. Jesus has given that directive, follow me, which He has to every one of us. What will it cost you? What's it going to cost us? What's your initial response to that, Brother Walter?
We lose our friends and the things we like to do in our flesh.
Okay.
I guess in the big picture of it, we're supposed to be following Him anyway, so we shouldn't even be worried about it.
And that's true. We're supposed to be following in the bigger picture. But we don't want to lose friends and the things that we like to do and the things we find pleasure in. And there is a cost to that. What else?
Shouldn't look at what it's going to cost, because right here in verse 22, the alternate is death. It's the be dead. Those that aren't following in that verse are dead. So it shouldn't really worry about what it's going to cost us.
But Brother Travis has jumped to my final point. If we don't follow Jesus Christ, what is the ultimate outcome of that? Death. There's no life for the child of God outside of Christ. There's no purpose for us outside of following Jesus Christ. That's what gives us our purpose and our identity and our joys and our comforts and our pleasures and all of those things that we have this side of eternal heaven. Is when we're following Jesus Christ, that's where that comes. To not follow Jesus Christ is to experience spiritual death. That means that we're naturally dead. There's a worse thing than natural death. Is to have known that we could have followed Jesus Christ and have experienced His blessings and His promises, and yet in our rebellion to Him and our rejection of Him, to experience a spiritual separation from Him and can't get back into that. That's a hell on this earth. Let's see. Let's go. While we're here in Matthew, let's go over to chapter 19. This is the story of the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus and says, "Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?" He desires a really good thing. He's asking Jesus, calls him good master, "And what shall I do?" And Jesus deals with this individual and tells him to keep the commandments. And so we're going to read verse 20 and 21 together, where he's responding to Jesus about Jesus telling him to keep the commandments. So, Brother Kyle, read that for us, verse 20 and 21.
All these things have I kept from my youth up, and what lack I yet? And Jesus said unto him, If thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me.
Well, I think there's two real things that's pointed out in this passage here. What is Jesus saying to the rich young ruler?
He's going to get rid of all his possessions
Yeah.
and the money that's back.
Get rid of all the possessions and the money that backs all that. Absolutely. So that's one of the things that's going to cost us as followers of Jesus Christ. Are our earthly comforts, if you want to call it that, got to be willing to give up all of those things.
It's a distraction.
It can be very much a distraction. I can't go to church tonight on a Wednesday night because I've got to work. Or I can't go serve this widow because I've got to do this to pay my bill to cover the things that I bought and want and all that kind of good stuff. We definitely can let those earthly possessions become a distraction. Other thoughts on that verse? Does Jesus have a problem with you having possessions? So what's the real heart of the issue here, Logan, with why he's pointing out to this man, you need to sell everything that you've got and give it to the poor, and then follow me?
He puts that above God.
Yes, that's it exactly. Because he's putting that above God. Jesus knows that because the directive is given to follow him, that we're going to struggle with that because there are other gods, plural, in our life. our work can become a god. We'll allow our identity to come out of our work. We'll allow the favor, whoever our God is beyond work. Like if our God is my dad and what he thinks of me about how successful I am at work and how much I have, who's really my God there, the work or my daddy? My daddy's and God, Jesus is going to come along and ask me to sacrifice my dad, to give up my relationship with my dad, because that's what's coming in between me and following Jesus Christ. Because what I know then is, what he knows then is that if my dad asks for something, I'm more likely to do that than follow what Jesus tells me to do. So that's one example of things. But there are gods that we've raised up in our life. We've allowed to take an altar and a position, and Jesus is saying, if you're going to follow me, go and sell all that you have. Give it all away. Give it to the poor, and then come and follow me. There's going to be a cost to that process. But the real cost to it, goes back to what Brother Travis was saying a little earlier, is that if you don't follow Jesus Christ and get that directive of following him, then your walk as a Christian is going to be, to a large degree, vain and void.
Be cast out in outer darkness.
That's right. Be cast out in outer darkness. There's going to be some weeping and gnashing of teeth. You may look religious, but sometimes we seem religious. But if we're doing something and we're not following Jesus Christ, then it's a religion. It's a man's religion, and it's not Christianity. It's not following Christ. It's just that directive given, follow me. That's the starting point for fulfilling the royal law, for doing anything as a Christian. But fulfilling the royal law, which is to love your neighbor as yourself, we cannot love somebody else if we're not following Christ in the process. Because we think that we have these grand ideas, and we think we know exactly what we need to do and how to do it and where to go about it. And we back up, Jesus, what would you have me to do? And as Jesus gives direction and understanding, then we walk it out, we follow it. We cannot follow. So that's the method for us. What's the method for fulfilling the royal law? Follow Jesus Christ. What kind of thoughts or questions do you have on that? Sister Logan, did you have something?
Well, with the rich young ruler, I keep thinking, like, that was probably a stronghold. Like, some things are easier for us to give up than others. But for him specifically, he told him to give up exactly what was the hardest for him to give up. Because we all have one of those or a couple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts? About to switch my thoughts to the outcome we're looking for.
I think of Abraham and Isaac when God told Abraham to give up his son. If we could just have that, and he didn't have to. The angel stopped him from taking his son. So I think if we have that mindset of whatever God asks to lay at his feet, we do it. Then we can still have those things as long as we're putting them under God, willing to give them up if he asks for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's a word that describes what Abraham was exercising there with his son. And that word is faith. I'll come back to that in a second. Any other thoughts? So if we're fulfilling the royal law, if that's our motive, we want to fulfill the royal law, we want to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we start with following Jesus Christ, then what's our goal for that other individual that we're loving on? What do we want to see as an outcome in their life? Say again?
To be closer to Christ.
Yes. So that's what I'm looking for, but I'm going to use these words. We want them to follow Jesus. That's the outcome. That's the what we're looking for someone to do. So if we've made an impact, if we've loved on somebody, and we've taken a meal to a widow, and they're just so thankful for that, and that expression of love, we don't want to take that glory for ourselves. We want to pass that right off to Jesus. Why? Why? Sister Crystal, why would we want to pass that off to Jesus and not take that glory on ourselves?
Because if we're really loving them, then we want them to follow Jesus, not follow us.
Absolutely. The goal is not to get them to follow us because we're some grand Christian. It's to get them to follow Jesus. If we take a meal to a widow that God put on our heart to take a meal to, Can you be there for that widow 24/7? Not necessarily. I know I can't. But who can be there? Who is there 24/7? Jesus is. And so if I'm not there and they can't reach me on the phone, they can pray, deliver a need to God, and God then moves in the heart and the mind of His people who are following Him to go and meet that need, who has the ability to do it at that season. God's not amiss in trying to deal with the needs of other people. And so at all points, if you begin to get someone to look at how good you are, then they're going to be dependent on you. Our goal is never to get them to look at us. In loving an individual, the moment we take that glory on ourselves and we're thankful that, man, they care about us now because of how much love we're showing. And we don't say we're prideful of that. We appreciate it. We begin to find our identity in the expression back from people of how we've loved them. We're in dangerous territory. Our outcome that we're looking for is always for them also to follow Jesus Christ. What is discipleship? Someone define for me what discipleship is. It's not a word that you find in Scripture. It's a word that we have today that describes a process. And what is discipleship? Brother Ham, what do you think?
I was thinking like the common word that we would use might be apprentice.
Yeah.
Kind of like a lead by example with some instruction along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So being an apprentice. So the disciples of Jesus were the apprentice to Jesus, to His instructions, to His method of life. It was radically different from what they'd experienced as a Jewish culture in their day. And so they were disciples. And then whenever Jesus ascended on the throne and they are left, those disciples, I mean, they turned the world upside down in pointing people back to Jesus Christ. But they were faithful at discipling other individuals. Paul, how many people did Paul affect with discipleship in the course of his ministry? You know, we go through and begin to label. He lists a lot of people who are fellow helpers in the gospel, or in the ministry, and in the truth, and people that he poured his life out to. He discipled them. All right. I believe personally, I think I've said this here a couple of times, but discipleship is the sign of a healthy biblical church. Organic discipleship. What I mean by that is not a program. Every Tuesday night we'll go out and do visitation, and that's our discipleship program. Nope. That doesn't necessarily wrong with that. I'm just saying that's not real discipleship. Discipleship is Brother Hamp seeing that Brother Michael is a young man that's about, as the end of his high school career, is about to go off to college, perhaps, Georgia Southern. Who knows how safe Georgia Southern is in terms of Christianity? Who went to Georgia Southern? Yeah, several of you in here. You just found Christ on that college campus, didn't you? Crystal? Yeah. You're still going to Georgia Southern? Okay. At the moment he is. All right, so he needs an extra layer of support. So discipleship would be, because we want him to go off and get a degree and do something to become, to provide for, and have a career and provide for his family. That's necessary. We don't want him to get swayed by the darkness that's there. And so if we just say, all right, go and we'll pray for you, is that discipleship? I don't believe it is. What do we want Michael doing on that college campus while he's away for 4 years, or however long it's going to be, doing that schooling and education? What do we want him to do? What is our desire? Say again?
Follow Jesus.
Follow Jesus. That's absolutely right. We want to see him follow Jesus. And so we need to be lifting up prayers for Michael and the other people. And whenever you guys were, Leslie, when you were there, that was 40 years ago. I believe the college campus is a whole lot worse than when Leslie was there 40 years ago. Don't you think? So Brother Michael's going to need discipleship. What's the goal of that discipleship? To help Michael follow Christ. Not to follow me, or not just to stay loyal to Waycross Primitive Baptist Church even. What if we want him to follow the Waycross Primitive Baptist Church? What have we done? What's the problem with that?
He's following our thoughts.
He's following our traditions at that point and our thoughts. And we do want him to come back to church here again. But we want him to follow Jesus. If we're going to fulfill the royal law, then we'll love others as we love ourselves. The only real way that we can love ourselves is to follow Jesus Christ. And if we want somebody else to love the Lord as well, they've got to be following Him. So that discipleship is a work of teaching and instructing and modeling for them like apprenticeship does. Let me show you how to do that. Let me show you how to work through this situation. Let me show you how to make these calculations. Let me walk with you and help you. Now that I've taught you, let me walk beside you and watch you do this. And so that apprenticeship gets them effective. And so that the outcome is a young man, young lady, not who can just work a piece of equipment, but who's following Jesus Christ. And that's the reciprocal side of that. What kind of thoughts do you have on that?
I think that apprenticeship is a really good analogy, because with an apprenticeship, you're giving something up. When you go to follow that master of that trade, you're giving something up. I mean, apprentices don't typically get any, they don't earn a salary. They're giving up their time and money. I did an apprenticeship when I moved down here, and that's you burn up a lot of your savings. You don't make any money for a while, but it's because you see a reward in the future that you're looking for, and also as that the master of that trade who's training that apprentice. A good master will seize that sacrifice and puts in the effort to train that apprentice as good as he can. So if we are in that way, if we're trying to train an apprentice, we need to recognize what that person, if that person is really trying to follow Jesus, we need to recognize that and put in the effort as their master in that sense too.
Absolutely. It goes both ways with that. Eli's doing an apprenticeship program as an electrician at the moment. Let's say his bosses teach him very little. Very little. He doesn't really know what it even means to, he can wire an electrical outlet up and that's it. Let's just say that's all he learns to do. And he gets his license to be an electrician, and you're going to build a house. How secure do you feel about asking him to come and do the electrical work at your house if the apprentice, the master, the craftsman, doesn't teach him anything? Discipleship comes out of a following Jesus, a walk with God, and it's for the purpose of helping that individual to have that walk with God, to be following Jesus. And so, let me just close with this thought. I believe every individual in this room needs two things because of our age. Number one, we need to be under the discipleship of somebody else. So if you don't have that already, you need to reach out and ask someone, one of the older ladies in the church, or the older men in the church, or spiritual father, spiritual mother. I encourage you to do that. And some of you do that. I know that you do. But you also need to be discipling somebody else. So I challenge you to pray. Don't do it because I said do it. Why do you need to do that? Because you're going to follow Jesus. So it starts with Jesus. What would you have me to do? Who would you have me to reach out to? What does that look like? God's Word's full of instruction of what discipleship looks like and what kind of things you need to do and talk about. And so it's not hard. It's intimidating because, I don't know, there's probably a different reason for every purpose as to why it's intimidating. But if we're fulfilling the royal law, we're going to love those people right around us. I can't love them if I'm not following Christ myself. Jesus, follow me. And my goal is not to get them looking like me. My goal is not to get them acting like me. My goal is not to get them doing what I think is the right things and jumping through the hoops that I think. The goal, the outcome, is to have them looking like Christ and following Christ in all things. So I just challenge you on those two things. Be under the discipleship and seek out who you can disciple. There's no one in this room who's too young, maybe Thomas, and that's it, too young to be he's under the discipleship of his parents already. But he doesn't need to be discipling anybody else. But everybody else needs to be discipling someone. Any thoughts in closing?